we are back. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with us. And right about now, we do want to get into a conversation that will shed more light on what we need to do if we are to become climate resilient. And the person who's going to be joining us for this interview, I am so excited about her, and you back at home need to feel the same. Right here at Kenya's Gold, we do have the distinct honor of being joined by Her Excellency Janie Doreen, who is the Australian High Commissioner to Kenya. Thank you so much, Her Excellency, for making time to talk to us today. How are you?
Great, and it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, anytime. Now, just jumping straight into the conversation, right now more than ever, we are talking so much about the devastating effects of climate change, and we can see what it's doing to our country right here in Kenya. Maybe if you just give us a global perspective, is Australia also facing the effects of climate change?
Yes, of course, Australia is impacted by climate change, just like Kenya, just like other countries. We are seeing more unseasonal weather. We are seeing more frequent, more severe disasters, wildfires, droughts, flooding, and that's impacting our communities. It's impacting our precious ecosystems. It's impacting our wildlife. It's impacting our infrastructure. But the evidence is also showing that we've just released our State of the Climate report for 2024. It came out at the end of October, and it shows that Australia is continuing to warm and that our oceans are continuing to warm as well. And it's also telling us that in the last decade, 8 of the 9 hottest years have occurred. So they're 8 of the 9 hottest years on record. And so we are going to have to adapt to this changing environment and work very hard to make ourselves more resilient. And the conversations we're having here today, the conversations that we have with Kenya and with other countries, help us to understand the dimensions of these responses and what we can learn from each other.
All right. Thank you so much, Her Excellency, for helping us understand just how much climate change is also affecting Australia. And with that in mind, with the changes that are happening, kindly talk to us about the climate resilience plans and also the recovery plan that Australia has when it comes to dealing with these climate changes.
Thanks for asking me about that. So for almost a decade now, since 2015, we have had a climate resilience and adaptation plan at the national level in Australia. And it really has 3 key objectives. The first one is to drive action and investment to respond to climate change. The second one is to improve climate information and services. And the third one is to assess how we're going and to learn lessons from the approach. And because we have 3 levels of government in Australia, it's actually really important to have a unified plan that sets out how those 3 levels of government work together, what each is responsible for, what the coordination arrangements are, what the reporting against that is, and how we learn lessons on our approaches together. So let me just give you one example. In agriculture, for example, as the climate is changing, as it's becoming hotter in Australia, we are a country that has limited water resources. We have to use our water very carefully. So we need to think about, in the next 20 to 50 years, what is that going to mean for our crops? Our sorghum, our wheat, our sugarcane, our corn, what is that going to mean for our crops? So there's quite a lot of work underway now in Australia to look at how we develop more resilient crop varieties that can withstand these weather extremes. That work is being led by our national science research organisation, the CSIRO, but it working with communities, with farmers, with associations, with governments, to help develop those seed varieties so that in the future we are able to continue to produce food for our people and for export.
Right.
It is resilient to climate impacts.
Right. You've mentioned something very important, and that is on agriculture, which we are very passionate about. And now that we are making these changes to deal with climate change, which is greatly affecting agriculture, how are you making sure that sensitization is reaching our farmers so that they understand there is a change and we also need to change how we've been practicing agriculture? How do you trickle down that information to every single person so that the entire community is part of the effort of mitigating climate change effects?
That's such an important question, and there's no one single approach that's going to meet that need. We need all of the systems to be working together to deliver that information and those services to farmers, be they farm extension services, be they access to new innovations and new technology, be they forums where farmers can voice their concerns and have input into the policy decisions that are being made. One of the ways that we do that in Australia is through farmer associations.
Right.
They play a very important role in this, but there is no one mechanism. We have to do lots of things to make sure that farmers are engaged, that they're getting good information, they are able to feed back information. They're part of this innovation cycle that I was talking about to improve our resilience and also maintain our productivity.
Right. So what you're calling the farmer associations, back at home we call them our farmer cooperatives, and I believe that is the right direction we need to go if we are to reach as many farmers and make sure they're involved in this project of fixing the climate. Now, we know when it comes to climate change, sometimes it comes with disasters as well. We have counted loss of animals, loss of human beings, property has been destroyed. So I just want to understand, when it comes to disaster risk management, how is Australia doing in that front?
I think this is also a very important question, and one of the things that the whole world is talking about is how we prepare for disasters, how we better prepare for disasters, how we better identify risks, and how we better mitigate them. So what can we do ahead of a disaster to stop it affecting our communities so severely, to minimise the loss of life, both human and animal, and to protect our ecosystems? We have a framework for doing that in Australia. It is a framework that is a national framework. It involves all levels of government, and it really is designed to look at how we manage risk, how we respond to risk, and it looks at both mitigation, so how do we stop risks, how do we stop disasters being so severe, how do we improve our information systems, our alert systems, how do we build stronger, more resilient infrastructure, how do we better prepare our communities, but also what can we do ahead of time to make those risks less severe. That framework has been in place for a very long time, and you know, every time there is a natural disaster, we look again at what can we learn from that and how can we improve our risk reduction strategies.
All right. Thank you so very much for sharing that, Her Excellency. And I believe having a proper framework towards disaster risk management is something that needs to be adopted in every part of the world so that we can be able to minimize the loss as much as possible. Now, as we get towards winding up this conversation, we'd like to know what you're doing just to entice more young people to get into the space of agriculture in whichever value chain. It could be at a farm level, a processing level, at an exporting level. What incentives are there to entice the young people in agriculture?
Well, young people play such an important role in agriculture, both in Australia and Kenya. And I see that since I've been in your country. I was in Eldoret last week. I was visiting a farm that was being run by a young woman employing other young people. and producing fertiliser commercially, and it's a startup, so it's only been around for 4 years. One of the really inspiring things about what I saw and what I see in Australia's young people as well is that their willingness to try new things and innovate is almost universal. You know, you give a young person a challenge, and if they've got the resources, they will rise to that challenge and find ways of making that work. But they're also the future of the agriculture industry, and so we need to support them with skills development, with employment opportunities, and we need to continually think about how our industries are going to evolve and bring in these young people. I think, too, we shouldn't just think of young people as a homogenous group, that within that large youth cohort, there are women, there are First Nations people or Indigenous people.
Right.
There are people with disabilities who can all make a contribution. And one of the things I think we need to continually think about is how do we also provide them opportunities to participate equally in these really important industries for both our countries.
All right. Thank you so much for those insights. Now, your presence in terms of time and resources are also very heavily felt in the Lake Region Economic Bloc Summit, which is happening in Busia County. We'd like to know why you felt it was very important for you to be part of this initiative.
Well, firstly, we were really pleased to be invited by Busia County to join this important conversation at the 12th Summit. And it's an important conversation this year about agriculture, food security and climate change, which are issues that both our countries care about, and they're issues that we both have a lot of experience on. So even at the subnational level, there's a lot that we can learn from each other. But as well as that, we have a good story to tell. We in Kenya are working with a range of civil society organisations and agricultural innovation organisations through the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. And we want to share some of that experience at the summit and hope that, you know, people will take away some useful information from that engagement.
Right, and we're looking to engaging with you further even after the summit. And finally, my last question to you would be, what do you think are the best resilient practices that people within the Lake Region Economic Bloc and also just Kenya as a whole, we can emulate from developed nations when it comes to mitigating and fighting matters climate change? What are those practices you're vouching for?
So the first thing I would say is that each community is different and has its own needs. So it starts with the counties and the communities themselves identifying what are their priorities and what are most important to them in the context that they're working. And then making those priorities clear so that partners like us can engage them on those priorities. I think the other thing too is that, as I feel very strongly that, you know, these are equal partnerships. It's not about a developed country teaching a developing country how to do something. These are economic partnerships where we learn from each other. And there's a lot that we can also learn from the practices here in Kenya. So this is why these collaborations are important. And, you know, if things come out of this where we're sharing our experience and that offers them ideas about what they could do, well, that's a fantastic thing. But it could work the other way as well. We could learn a lot the way the economic bloc is working together. Yep.
Right. Thank you so very much, Her Excellency, for your time and also being very generous with the information. We have learned so much from this conversation. It was more like a virtual benchmarking, but we're hoping very soon we will come down to Australia and see how things are happening live, right? We're looking forward to that.
We welcome Kenyans to Australia. There are many Kenyans in Australia now, and we welcome the partnership and the collaboration. Thank you for having me.
I will definitely follow up on that conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated.
Bye for now.
Now we have come to the end of this conversation with Her Excellency Jenny Doreen, who is the Australian High Commissioner to Kenya. And something so important that I've picked out of this conversation is when we're talking about including the youth when it comes to all matters agriculture, let us remember that in there we have women, we have young girls, we have persons with disability, we have the marginalized communities, and all these people have different needs. So let's just not walk around putting everyone in a blanket. Let us be specific and work towards making sure every single person's needs are taken care of. Now that's all we did have for you in our Gold Conversation, sticking to a mission of working so hard to find out what we can do to make sure agriculture is sustainable in the wake of climate change. Thank you for watching.
Na bila shaka huyo Ningina akizungumza na balozi wa Australia, na amezungumzia sana kuhusiana na mabadiliko tabia nchi, lengo kubwa likiwa ni kukandamiza nguvu yake, hasa ukizingatia kwamba inaendelea kutatarisha na kuhatarisha hali ya ukulima katika mataifa mengi ulimwenguni. Vile vile amesema kitu kimoja kwamba ukame, kuwepo na mafuriko na mvua ya gharika bila shaka bado ni mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Bila wasiwasi, kila wakati tunakuambia kwamba hapa Kenya's Gold tutasoma sana, tutasikiza kutoka kwa wachanganuzi, wadau na vile vile wakereketo wanaofahamu mengi sana kuhusiana na ukulima. Hapa ni darasani bila shaka, na ndiposa na kusi kila wakati usalie nasi kwa sababu utajifunza mengi kweli kweli. Na sasa tunachukua mapumziko, tukirejea ni kufahamisha kwamba wakati tulileta makala ya kwanza tulimuona mtoto jinsia ya kike, mkulima wetu alikuwa jinsia ya kike. Sasa tukamuona balozi vile vile jinsia ya kike, na ni kufahamisha kwamba atakayekuja kule mwisho vile vile bado ni jinsia ya kike, ule ni mkulima vile vile. Na pongezi sana jinsia ya kike katika ukulima wenu ambao mnaendeleza. Twende mapumzikoni.